Welcome, everyone. I want to start by addressing the Territorial Acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in the Robinson-Huron Treaty Territory and that the land on which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, specifically the Garden River and the Batchewana First Nation, as well as the Métis people. The roll call, Lisa is away, but she is here with in the Zoom meeting. As we can see, I'm the vice chair. I'm taking her spot just in case there's any electronic situation that arises.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome. And Rick Webb is absent, and Ian McKenzie, Matthew Shoemaker. Call the meeting to order. It is now 2:08. Any conflict of interest declarations? Seeing none. Number 5, questions and information arising out of the minutes and not otherwise on the agenda. Seeing none. The adoption of the meeting of the minutes on June 30th, 2022.
Also moved.
Moved by Ian, seconded by Matthew. Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting as presented are hereby approved. Motion to accept the agenda. I need a mover. Matthew. Seconder, Lisa. Resolved that the agenda of the regular meeting as presented be hereby approved. All in favor? Approved. Number 8, Chief, communications and reports.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So I'll take you to the ledger. Not a lot of change on the board account ledger. I see grand total is 151,123.88. Nothing significant to add other than what's in front of you there, Mr. Vice Chair.
Point of order, Mr. Vice Chair. Did we make a donation to that officer that was gunned down in Toronto about a month ago? I believe it was Constable Hong.
Andrew?
Because in the past, when that's happened and there's been a tragedy, this board has forwarded a small donation.
Chief?
I don't believe we did.
We did not. We have not been consistent in that.
The issue, Ian, it's a good question. The issue is if we did this one, which is important. I don't know if we had done all of them in the past and therefore we're showing a bit of preference. So I leave it to the board's discretion. I'm happy to do that as your chief. I just need the board's approval.
I know we've done it in the past.
For some, but I think it wasn't always consistent. With
Yeah.
I would agree with that, Chief. Any
It
questions?
has always been consistent, and Rick had sent an email to all of us. Rick Webb's not here concerning that. So I think that's something us as a board we should determine. I think it should be all or nothing. We send something to all of the fallen officers, or we don't. Maybe just keep it locally. So I think that's probably something we need to determine as a board at our next meeting when Rick is present as well, and develop a policy in terms of that. I think that would be a good plan.
So we can put it on the agenda for the next.
Meeting. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Just on that note.
Ian, that's not to say that we can't send something once we decide. Even though there's been a bit of a delay, I think that still would be totally appropriate that we can do that as well.
Any other comments or questions?
The only thing I wanted to say is Bob and I and 4 other officers attended. Ray and the other bike officer, Spencer Guild attended, and we had a great representation there. Specifically for the bike attendants, because he was in the course of his duties, his life was taken as a bike officer. So it was a very solemn occasion, and our comments and thoughts and supports to the family. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Chief, you've addressed A, B, monthly overtime?
Yeah, so we'll go on to monthly overtime. So I'll take you to the screen that Lincoln has up there. So you're going to see from a number of different angles or perspectives that overtime went up significantly in August, both from a call for service issue. We probably had a couple homicides in there, a number of arsons, maybe an attempt, 2 ongoing investigations there with unknown suspects. So we went from in July 56, 875 to almost double that, 108 in August. And that's also coupled with a time period where annual leave is at its highest, obviously during the summer, as per the collective agreement. So when you look at the running total, which is the second table at the bottom there, you can see we're still under where we were last year in 21. So this time last year we were 704. This year we're 684. So, you know, there's a bit of a buffer there, but we are sort of closing in on the same sort of overtime draw 3/4 of the way through the year. The next slide, you'll see on 3-year monthly staff shortage time, again, an increase in July of 24.5 to 36,309. A little bit ahead of where we were in 21 in terms of staff shortage overtime costs. Similar for the next chart that shows 20,000 in July to 34 in patrol. So in terms of our budget, you can see at this point, we are on the red there. You can see, Angela, that would indicate that we're 379 over where we should be at this time.
That's our projection.
Yeah. So we on a $33 million budget, we're fairly close to where we should be in terms of all expenditures. So we're trying to keep that in check. And I know I've had discussions with the board in terms of overtime being a significant challenge, giving our staffing levels and calls for service and a variety of other factors that we deal with. And that will come up for discussion probably in the budget as well. Take us to
Chief, I just had one comment on the budget, the year to date. So year to date, June 30th, our leftover for salaries is at 45%. So 45.97. So Chief or Angela, that 379 that you think is going to be overrun, do you determine that will probably come from salaries?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I figured. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. If we go to court time costing comparisons, you can see year to date, we have 21,000 less or more than where we are, right, Angela, in terms of where we should be? Less, yeah, 21 less. So we're 29% less or 21,000 less than where we expect to be for a court that we usually occur each year. You can see in exceptional cases, we did 49.5 hours on a white trial and 110 hours paid out on the Lewis trial, just to give you an indication of the two areas that were heavy on court. So because we have 3 months of data here, I didn't think it was fair to take you through each month and each year to date, because I'm pretty sure you'd lose interest in me. So what I've done is
Never.
well,
Never.
I know it's hard, John, but so I'm going to take you to the July one that is cumulative of January to July comparison of 21 to 22, and I'll let Lincoln pull that up. He's pretty quick. So what we're seeing here, it's a good news story actually in the first 7 months in terms of both workload and both violent and property crimes. You'll see that our total calls for service are down 4%, which isn't a lot between 21 and 22 of January to July. Robberies are down 60% from 75 to 30. Assaults are down 10%, 424 to 381. Sex assaults are down 35% from 71 to 46. Your crimes of property, which I know there's the perception in the community that B&Es are up and property thefts are up, but actually in occurrence workload, which again is based on what people tell us happens. Hopefully people report everything that occurs to them, but on B&E totals, we're down 36% from 553 and 21 to 352. And they're relatively equal across both business and residential break-in enters of 28 and 32 respectively. If you jump down to theft of motor vehicle, they're down 30% from 114 to 79. Thefts are down from 1407 to 1187 or 16%. Shoplifting specifically 12%. Theft from motor vehicle, which is where people break into your car and steal change, is up 6.2, but really 436 to 463 wouldn't be a really marked increase. Mischiefs are down about 9%, and motor vehicle collisions are up 30%, and that's usually explained by people are more mobile once COVID restrictions have been lifted. Mental Health Act calls for service are down 19%, but bail violations are up 15%. And that's basically the best summary of the 2 years and the 7 months of calls for service.
Thank you, Chief.
Vice Chair?
So
Yeah.
Lisa, Madam Chair.
Chief, I wanted to just point out the Mental Health Act, the year to date from January to July. So in 2021, we had 344 incidents reported, and in so far this year, 283. Have you done any kind of analysis as to why? Do you think is it the effects of the community wellness bus, the outreach workers from homelessness and housing, the downtown ambassador program? Because I know there's been an issue with the day treatment program being closed till no further notice at Surrey Hospital. And I know that Soya has been seeing an increase with folks attending to them. On average on a Saturday, they probably serve well over 100 to 130 people. So, in terms of that, because that's sort of the one thing that, public perception is that it's getting worse and people aren't able to get help. Have you done any dive into, beyond the data as to socially why this is happening or has happened?
Well, I think your 3 or 4 points there, Madam Chair, would be indicative of alternative means of dealing with people in crisis. So maybe the police aren't called every time someone goes into crisis, that alternative services that you mentioned, like the downtown ambassadors, are called and they mitigate, and or even if we're called person in crisis, that these services that are out there, like the wellness bus can mitigate, us arresting and bringing to the hospital and trying to form. So all of these services are working very cooperatively with their police service. I'm a strong supporter of the ambassador program and the wellness bus. Any areas where the city can increase this level of support to people in crisis, long-term drug addiction and mental health, I'm very supportive of. And that may, in fact, I can't say it is, but it may in fact be related to the reduced numbers. 19% is relatively significant. But what's not in your data is that there are a significant group of homeless people in the community that are, setting up different temporary tent accommodations, and we're called, and we don't simply come and remove. We make sure that Mike Natto's crew are advised. We have social services there, and we try to ensure that we treat them respectfully. We recognize the property rights of citizens to have these things removed from their property because they're trespassing. But we also try to use that as an opportunity, to get them into services and support. And they are available in the city. And I know, Madam Chair, you and I have had discussions about those situations around Gore Street where, the services are there, but people simply choose not to take them. And so it's an ongoing challenge.
Chief, this might be an unfair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it's the most common question that's asked me, being a member of the Police Services Board. How much of those individuals with mental health, addictions, et cetera, are from Sault Ste. Marie, and how many are from outside Sault Ste. Marie? Or do we even know that equation?
I can't answer that with evidence because I don't necessarily know that. I know Mike Nadeau and I have had many discussions, both formally and informally, and I do know that he is aggressively looking at that particular issue. He's made me aware that his organization, if they find people from another community, they give them bus fare and references to shelters in the area where they allegedly came from. But there are some, sir, I do know that. I just don't know how many. Mike may be able to give further information. It's a little more accurate than mine.
Any
Yeah.
more questions? Lisa?
The point in time count that was last October, they didn't, that wasn't part of the data. It was more, culturally, that type of thing, male, female, do you identify as Aboriginal, that sort of thing. But there has been some anecdotal, Ian, for sure, in terms of folks, from GTA, North Bay, various communities getting a bus ticket and coming, but there's no evidence of that. The homelessness population does tend to be transient at times. So I think that's just something that we're dealing with. But it's a good thing. There are a lot of good organizations out there that are doing a lot of work with our homelessness and our addicted populations. Soya has a free meeting every Tuesday night at Gore Street at their location at 180, where folks can go in. And I know that Chief, your officers have always had a good relationship with that organization as well. So it's not that the issue is gone. It's just that, perhaps folks are getting more services and police don't have to go take them to hospital.
And that's a concern that I've heard, is that at least the conception that there may be that, are we becoming a good place to go if you've got an addiction, or a good place to go if you've got mental health, because we have more services available here in Sault Ste. Marie, friendlier services and more options? That's the questions that have been raised. And I'm just asking to find out. It would be good if we knew there was 360 homeless or people with heavy addictions in Sault Ste. Marie, and 30% of them are actually from out of town.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you. And Chief, would you start us into the budget report, please? That's mine, but you can use it.
It's okay. I'm gonna step out a minute.
I got mine else here. I just have them buried.
Good. Okay.
Thank you very much. So for our budget this year, are you able to pull this up, or we just have that?
No,
Just have this? Okay. So I have a budget presentation here, and I'll give a copy to our press after the meeting. But so basically, we're looking at a 5.6% increase from 22 to 23. And that 5.6% increase is being undertaken in a world right now where we have a consumer price index of at least 8%. I'm going to give you sort of the three biggest categories that contribute to that. One of them is COVID recovery, where a lot of the training costs, a lot of the basic vehicle expenses and whatnot are related to COVID, or availability of infrastructure and training and travel. The cyber attack recovery is also a number 2 chunk in that. And the third is simply your CPI at 8.1%. It simply went up across the board. Of the 5.6% increase, outside of salaries and regular operating, as chief of police, I really only control about 0.4% of that in terms of what I can try to get down or mitigate or manage. And so when we look at that 5.6, I've put it into a number of categories for you. The first is the complement increase. And just for the record, this is not accounting for salary increases. This is adding 4 bodies to our base. So we are currently at 138 officers. And as chief, I'm proposing that we go to 142, which adds 1 officer to each platoon. The board had already approved an additional 3 officers to the base, I believe at the July meeting, that went from 135 to 138, and this is 138 to 142. We haven't had, and I know I've reported this before, we haven't had an increase to the base FTE complement of the Sault Ste. Marie Police Service since 1998. Our calls for service, specifically related to violent crime, have increased at least 80% over the last 5 years. All of further information is I'm doing an analysis of the last year to see how that trend has continued, probably at your next board meeting. So the overtime projections that you've heard me talk about today, and I sort of alluded to it earlier, we're at least almost $500,000 of overtime, and that would allow me to purchase 5 or 6 FTEs, full-time equivalent officers, and get 50% more work out of them simply because they're not being paid time and a half. The argument is one can't run a police service on overtime. Overtime contributes to additional sickness in the organization. It turns into situations where officers simply don't have the energy or time to come in because they've just finished a set of 4 shifts at 12 hours. They need time with their families. And the additional piece that I will say is that when we have downtown associations, businesses calling for greater police visibility and enforcement in the downtown core, the problem is when we have enough officers, whether it be zone or not zone, it's based on calls for service, to be blunt. They are in the downtown core, except they're being called off. They're called to different service, different calls around the city. So to keep a complement that we know is sufficient for this community, we're listening to the community, we're listening to the businesses, we're listening to the people that stop us in the street, and they're saying we need to have more officers. When you compare that to our violent crime statistics that are actuarial data, they're not made up, they're exactly what we're dealing with. We have 4 homicides, 2 ongoing arsons in the last 4 or 5 months. These are very expensive investigations, and they draw on the service. When we have additional community representations like parades and just additional things that the community wants to see their police service have, it's a challenge to staff simply because you've had the same staffing complement from 1998. The board has been very good to my executive team in terms of acknowledging 3 additional officers last year. And you'll see in this budget the approval of 4 FTEs, certainly what I'm proposing for next year. So we bring our complement to 142. So I acknowledge the efforts of the board for listening. I know things are tight, times are tight, but we have to be able to respond to calls for service and actuarial data, which is actual occurrence workload. So if I can just state in my notes here, see an 80% increase on the sides. You know, and we've also seen 2 resignations and 5 retirements in the last couple of years. And that is indication of policing is a very difficult job. And it's much different than it was 5 years ago and very much different than it was 10 years ago. We're also looking at, when we talk about complement, civilian part-time staff temporary, and that is for the purpose of implementing our equity, diversity, and inclusion plan. There are several chiefs of police in the province that took a proactive step to having a third party look at our policies related to training, hiring, promotion, to ensure that the way we did business was consistent with EDI policy. There is a number of changes we will be making in the near future. They'll be very public, and we need to ensure that this is done sooner than later. So we're hiring additional staff for that purpose, as well as a backup to Lincoln in corporate communications. Those are the complement increases. I can go through the others a little more quickly. Travel and training increases have went up 41%. Canine Succession, we need to identify and train a new officer and infrastructure to deal with our canine program. The additional hire of basic constables, the 4 FTE that I've talked about, require upfront funding for their OPC, even though they pay for that over time themselves. COVID delays have been significant, as I mentioned, catching up with training. We have a number of emergency service officers that require hostage rescue training. As you know from the CPI, prices have went up across the board in terms of the consumer price index. I mentioned additional training for equity training and diversity in the organization. The fleet costs have increased by 7%. That's due to COVID and a lack of availability. Fuel prices have been budgeted for 25%. We may have a buffer in our budget there if it doesn't continue to climb. Under miscellaneous and human resources support, we have a third-party contract to ensure that members that come off emotional leave have demonstrated and are appropriate to enter the organization from the chief's perspective to make sure they're safe and the community's safe. And so it's sort of a third-party company that gives us my own set of eyes to the reintegration of members back into the service. We've added emergency services unit to the safeguard program, and our rent costs for the OPP IDEN facility have went up. That's contributed to a 20% increase. Legal fees have increased by 40%, or 40,000, due to a number of Police Act hearings we have. The board facilities report, we've increased that by 150%, and that is, sounds more than it is. It's 110,000 each year out of our budget that we put into a separate budget, and that was on the recommendation of our the city's CAO, that if you're planning on building, you need to start to build a fund each year to be used for assessments of potential new builds. Computer equipment has increased by 40,000 due to post-cyber attack requirements and Microsoft 365 upgrade. Photo equipment has increased by 8,000, and other capital equipment has increased by 50%. And that is specifically the CCTV provincial grant that we received to put cameras across the city in high crime areas. The province has been good enough to give us 150. We have to match that 150, and it will be a wonderful crime prevention and investigative tool going forward, as well as that's it for capital increases. And that, Mr. Chair, or
Mr. Vice Chair.
So I'm getting confused, Mr. Vice Chair and Mrs. Chair.
I thought it would be less confusing.
Madam Chair,
The way to
that is the, okay. There's a
Maybe
lot
not.
of chairs going around.
Maybe not. I would just give a statement in terms of, I'm also chair of the Finance Committee, and I want to thank John and Matt, and also the hard work that Angela has done with this budget, and the chief and the deputy chief as well. There are some good things, grants are up. We always talk about expenses. We never talk about, good story revenues. So grants are up 67% from last year. So that's, really something that I commend staff, because as board members, we have nothing to do with that. That's all staff driven. And we're very supportive with the chief, with the adding to complement. It's really important. We realize this, not just in terms of adding to our police force, but there's also going to be a lot of retirements. And I think having a young, vibrant, and diverse workforce coming forward is going to serve our city well. So Chief, I just want to let the public know and the media that the committee went line by line on this. We had a meeting a couple of weeks ago. We asked a lot of hard questions. And thank you so much for this budget. So just so everyone's aware, it gets approved or not approved by our board. Then it goes to the city, and then it will be up to city council in terms of what gets approved. So just so that everyone understands the process, who's watching or who's reporting. So I just want to thank the staff and the team for getting this budget put together. And I know that you work really hard with the city treasurer as well, Angela. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ian, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I'm fine. I'm satisfied with the budget.
Matt?
Just don't have to see the facilities money going in there for planning for future improvements.
Thank you. And thank you, Angela and staff and chief. Finance Committee, thank you all for making this task a less onerous one than perhaps in the past. And we feel good about it, and we are doing some good things with that. So thank you very much. And I will put the question unless there's any other comments. Can I have a mover?
I also move that we accept the budget recommendations.
Ian?
I can second, John.
Be it resolved that the board has approved the 2022 budget as presented in the amount of $33,793,450. All in favor?
2023 budget. Did you say
I'm
2023?
sorry.
It
Yeah,
says 2022.
it says
Yeah.
2022. I'm sorry. All in
Okay.
favor?
The ground.
Approved. Approved. Thank you, Matt. Matt is being excused. Okay, our next one, small mid-sized police service meeting.
Yeah, this is just to let the community and the board know that from October 5th to 7th of next week, the Sault Ste. Marie Police Service will be hosting what's called the Small to Mid-Size Chiefs Conference. And it's an excellent opportunity to have similar services and populations. We have very similar issues when you look at our community compared to other communities in the north and across Ontario with comparable populations and FTEs. To sit down and have an opportunity to discuss how we're handling the challenges and what solutions that another service might have we could use, and vice versa. It's also a wonderful opportunity to get expert speakers in that can give us insights, for example, on WSIB claims, the case law, return to work. That's a big function of our challenges today. And we're also fortunate enough to have the new Minister of the Solicitor General, Michael Kersner, is coming on the Friday morning, and Member of Parliament Ross Romano to say a few words. And I thought it was a good opportunity for mid-sized chiefs to have that dialogue with the new minister to cabinet as well. So it's going to be an excellent opportunity. I'll be bringing my senior command there as well. We're being hosted locally at the water tower. We thank them for hosting, and it'll be just a couple days of information exchange, discussing with the minister the issues at hand.
Any comments for the chief?
Thanks, Hugh. Hugh, when is that? When is it?
It'll be October 5th to 7th, Lisa.
Okay.
And Lisa is in the corner here. She's our acting chief most of the time, and she's done a wonderful job in putting both this together and many other functions, and she doesn't get enough acknowledgement. So a
Chief,
shout
how
out.
many associations, how many police services would be involved in that?
I believe we have 60 folks coming and 48 different services.
45 different services.
45 different
people
services.
from different services.
Yeah. So
So
Chief,
30
just let us know if there's any opportunity where you would like any representation from the board or any meet and greets, and we can certainly make ourselves available.
So, yeah, that's sort of why I brought it up, is I thought maybe that I'd throw the invite out to the board, and whoever's available, you're welcome to join us. And Lisa will send you
Contact Lisa.
the updated syllabus, so there may be certain things that you're more interested in than others as well. So,
Certainly, thanks. Yeah, I'll be back. I'm back on the 2nd.
okay, great.
Okay, thank you. Any new business? Seeing none, the next meeting date is October 27th, 2022.
Wonderful. Thanks, John.
Adjournment time is 2:43. I need a mover. Ian, and a seconder. Lisa, you're the only one, Lisa. Okay. Regular meeting is adjourned.